I had a conversation with my neighbor a few weeks ago before he left to go visit his brand new granddaughter. And he was taking his wife and his brand new camper that he bought. And he was telling me of how excited he was to not only be a grandfather, but also to retire coming up here in the next year. And he was telling me that it took him such a long time to get to this point where he had everything together. The house is paid off. His cars are paid off. The camper that he just bought is paid off. And when I asked him how he went about this, he told me a few things. He told me that he was very rigid with the way he approached his finances, and then that he set a date on the calendar of when he wanted to retire and when he wanted to pay off the car and pay off the house. And he marked that date down and then reverse engineered how much he had to pay to hit that target. When I asked him how he felt, he told me that he felt free, and I could tell he was moving a little bit lighter. It was very inspiring to see that and to hear some of his hard-won wisdom over the years. And that makes me think of it comes down to setting an aim. And that might be simple, right? It is simple to say, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. But obviously the hard part is having the discipline to stick to that and to execute on making sure that you're doing whatever is needed to be done to eventually hit that long-term target. And those words, like aim and target, they come from the history of our ancestors being hunters and gatherers. I mean, our psychological mindset is built off of a hunting platform, and we look to put a target on something, and to hit that target is the goal. And hitting targets is not my best skill. I'm a horrible archer. I have 2 bows here that I never use because I've literally shot all but 1.5 arrows into the ground. That's neither here nor there. But in archery, the term for missing the mark is called a sin. Now, looking at it from a religious context, that's where we pulled that word from. We pulled that word from the archery hunting nomenclature of missing the mark. And the reason why I bring that up is because Dr. Jordan B. Peterson talks about how most people don't set a mark because they don't like the way that they feel or the potential of feeling bad when they miss the mark, thus sinning. And coming from a Judeo-Christian background, which has had such a huge influence on our Western civilization, whether apparent or not apparent, looking at sin, looking at missing the mark in the most literal sense of the term, in the figurable sense, also in the Western tradition, is this idea of redemption and being saved through individual actions. And I know that we're going to talk about later in this podcast about setting goals, putting guardrails around those goals, and then adjusting around it when you miss it. But if you don't have any target to hit, that aimlessness, is it aimlessness? The lack of aim in and of itself brings a sense of anxiety because you don't know where you're heading. And for the longest time, I've been aimless. One of the things that has helped me is writing down goals, writing down bad goals. I can remember at the start of this year, I started writing down goals on a weekly basis. I had no idea what I was doing. But I soon realized that even when I was missing the goals, it was helpful for me to have them down to see what I was missing, why I was missing it, and it was giving me something to chip away at. It's kind of like having a stone that you can chip away at to make a statue. And if you don't have that that object there to start with, then you have nothing to chip away at. And to me, in my experience, that's how goals are. And even if you're nervous about the goals, you're unsure about the goals, just getting it down, getting it out there allows you to work forward and be less anxious as a result. Now, why do I bring this up? I bring this up because having that conversation with my neighbor, that inspiration that I got from him and his look of freedom is something that I am certainly seeking. And I feel that this idea of freedom is under threat currently in our society. And I don't mean by the radical left or the extreme right. I'm not talking in the political sense. What I'm talking about is in the sense of our freedom of being able to focus and place attention on the things that we are self-aware that will bring true helpful progress, not only in our lives as individuals, but also in the lives of our family members and our communities. And just as my neighbor had set goals and had the discipline to achieve his financial objectives, we can do that as well with our attention. And our attention is, when you look at the numbers right now, you can look at the numbers, you can look at the companies that siphon our attention and sell that attention to people like me, marketers. We can actually look at the financial results when you see the quarter over quarter growth of revenues for Facebook, Twitter. When you look at the growth of Google, when you look at the growth of Amazon, all of these companies, at the root of it, they have a mass amount of computing power to collect, organize, and distribute your data for profit to people who are trying to capture your attention. And I know I talked about the attention economy specifically from a news media point of view in episode number 149, titled "The Good News for Us is by Us." But this is a little bit closer to home, doubling down on social media. My wife and I just watched the documentary Social Dilemma on Netflix. I highly suggest that you watch it. It does a great job of personifying the AI and computing power that these tech giants are leveraging to capture and sell attention. And at the root of it was this idea of it is in these companies' best interest to develop as much certainty as possible, certainty of the behavior, not only of knowing how the users engage in the platform, but also the types of change they can create unbeknownst to the user who has no idea that they're being manipulated. So it's a great documentary. Check it out. That's the dark side of social media. And I know we all know about that, and we all understand that it's so easy to fall into our own echo chambers where we don't have a shared sense of reality. And I feel like we're seeing that leak out into the streets, literally and figuratively. But in my own perspective, just because there is powerful negative consequences doesn't remove the positive aspects around it. Jack Dorsey, the founder and CEO of Twitter, excuse me, obviously has a bias towards social media usage. However, he refers to Twitter as being the global consciousness of being that the town square for the public conversation at large. And there's a way to use that in a way that serves as the public consciousness that I'm going to talk to in a bit. But for me, at a personal level, I know I've talked about in the past when I wasn't sure what I was going to do coming out of college, I used Twitter as a tool to engage with people who I didn't have a relationship, which eventually over time with patience and persistence and positivity turned into an opportunity for me to build off of career-wise. And I can think of one person in particular who was in a line of work that I wanted to get into. And I spent 6 months going back and forth with this person and being positive and being encouraging and asking questions. And I remember the first time I saw this person in the flesh, they immediately knew who I was, and they came up to me and they gave me a hug. And to me, that is the type of positive change that can result when you use social media for connection, with the awareness that there are incentives and technology geared against you to capture your attention for as long as they can, no matter if they're building you up or tearing you down to sell it to marketers. So with that being said, to create that positive change, for me, taking a play from my neighbor's playbook of setting things down and then reverse engineering it, to me, when it comes to your attention, you have to reverse engineer your calendar. You have to place the non-negotiables on the calendar, whether it be work. So if it's work, if it's family time, place it on the calendar, specific days, specific times. These things can't be moved. And then you got to prioritize your health, your mental health, and your relationships. So after you have your work obligations, your house cleaning things to do, once that's down on the calendar, prioritize health. Where are you going to exercise and for how long and what day and what time? Same thing with your mental health. Things like creating, learning, reading, teaching. All good for your mental health. Meditation, yoga, make sure that those are on the calendar and that those are non-negotiable. And then relationships. Make sure you're blocking out time to reach out to family members, reach out to friends. Make sure you have the space to spend time with your significant other, because your health and your mental health and your relationships at the end of this journey are the only things that you're going to think about on the way out, if you were lucky enough to have the chance to do so. And then after you have those non-negotiables, blocks of times cemented on the calendar, then look at the open areas on the calendar. Look at the open space, primarily space that is before an hour before you go to sleep, because studies have shown that using technology the hour before you're going to bed actually hinders sleep. So if you could do it an hour before you get ready to get to sleep, block out 30 minutes and I pulled this term, or I pulled this number from Dan Buettner, who is the author of the Blue Zones book. He popularized this idea of blue zones, these areas in the world that have some of the healthiest and happiest and long-living centenarians, so people that live to be 100 or older. And through his conversations with them, having 30 minutes of TV and social media is actually a positive. So there, you obviously going over 30 minutes has negative return on investment. When you find yourself aimlessly scrolling and giving your attention and your awareness up to a AI on newsfeed can create anxiety and in some cases depression, which leads me to, after blocking out that time of 30 minutes for TV and then 30 minutes of social media, don't go on social media during that time. And the way for me that this has been easiest is to remove all social media accounts from my phone and only go on social media on my laptop at the scheduled allotted time. So this gives me the ability to dictate how I'm going to use social media as a tool, instead of the tool that is social media using my attention aimlessly to sell it to other people. Excuse me. And then finally, stay off of the news feed. The news feed, or the home feed rather, is not home base for you. It's just a place where algorithms are attempting to get you to react and get you to stay. So stay away from that and lean on search interests. So use Twitter search. I feel that Twitter search right now is more important than Google search. And the reason why I say that is because in the social dilemma, they talk about how your Google is not my Google. And if you type in certain queries, you're going to get different things that auto-populate and finish the sentence depending on what your search history is, where you're located, what time it is, and what else is going on. On Twitter, using the search function, you can filter by latest tweets or by top tweets. And to me, that allows the public conversation to kind of give you a cadence of, okay, what is being received and kind of pushed to the surface by people, and then what's coming in most recent as a result of that. So leaning on search, I like Twitter search. And then I know this is a dirty word, but rabbit holes. They talk about rabbit holes in YouTube of people going down crazy rabbit holes of flat Earth theory. But to me, there is a positive in going down learning rabbit holes if you have the guidelines around it of when you're going to do this, for how long you're going to do it, and make sure you're sticking to that time. For instance, I like going down when I'm reading a book on Kindle. I use my phone, iOS, Apple. That has the ability, you can click on a word and you can look up that word, and then you can search that word and it brings up all these results. And to me, I found myself drilling down, 5, 6, 7 layers of resources deep, learning about, for example, things like physics. So as an example, if I come across the word physics, I can highlight that, look that up, and go into Google search, see Wikipedia that pulls up, get into the Wikipedia result, And then if there's a word inside of the Wikipedia result, I can look up that word that I'm not sure about. And I can look at that Wikipedia page, and I can look at the sources that are on that Wikipedia page, so on and so forth. I found myself going down learning rabbit holes for hours and 2 hours at a time, and walking away much more informed as a result, in a healthy manner, because I was the one that was in control of it, rather than the Twitter, Facebook home feed, or the Google search results. And then finally, track yourself. See how much time you actually are spending on your phone on these platforms. For Apple users, you have the screen time capability. So review that on a weekly basis. See what you're looking at and for how long. Be honest with yourself. Do you feel like you're spending less time on these platforms will be helpful for you? And if so, adjust and write down as much as you can. Track and write down the cliche of, if it doesn't get tracked, it doesn't get measured. And you're being tracked all over the internet. But the beautiful thing is that we have the resources as individuals to also track our behavior and adjust accordingly, so that way we could set the proper guidelines, the proper direction, and the proper goals, so that way we could be a little bit more aware and eventually more free. So with that, thank you for your time. I hope you're staying well, staying sane, and until next week, have a good one.